So let's fix a few of these problems we have with the menu and the menu button. The first thing I see is that the menu button is showing up when the screen's wide enough. So let's fix that. I'm in our PS Framework controller, and you can see that we're setting is menu button visible to true. But if the screen's wide enough, we want to set this to false so that the menu button isn't visible at all. And I'll paste in some code. So I pasted in some code here. The first thing we need to do is pull in the $window service. And the reason we want to use $window rather than just plain window is for testing purposes. It's not the easiest thing to test with a window object, so we'll just pass one in. So looking at the code, we're going to wrap window as a jQuery object, and then we're going to call the on function to handle an event. The event we're interested in is resize. So when the viewport is set up or the device is rotated or a browser window is resized, this event will be fired. And one feature of jQuery is that we can add a namespace to the event. So here we're adding a namespace called PS Framework. And that'll be useful later on when we destroy this event. But for now, just know that we're handling the resize event and it does have a namespace attached to it. On a resize, we're going to take our scope and call the $apply function. And remember that whenever we're inside of a jQuery event, we're going to want to do that because Angular has no idea when our scope values change. So within the apply, we'll call check width. Check width is down below. Actually, this should be a $window here. But we'll grab the width and set that to the inner width of the window. Again, that's a jQuery function. And we're going to add a new variable to scope called isMenuVisible. And let's actually set that up on top first. We'll just set it to true. So in check width, we'll be setting the scope isMenuVisible to true if the width is greater than 768 pixels. So if it's larger than a tablet, say, we'll show the menu by default. We also have this isMenuButtonVisible field, and we can just set that to the opposite of the isMenuVisible property. Going back up a bit, we have our on, and we're also going to call off. When our scope receives the destroy message, we're going to want to make sure that we release this handler from the window. So we'll wrap up window again, and we'll call off, and we'll take off our resize with our namespace of PS Framework. And again, these two have to match. And that way we won't interfere with anything else that might be on the resize event for window. So the key thing we're testing here at this point is this isMenuButtonVisible flag. Let's run it. So the button still shows up when we initially load it, but as we resize the browser, we can see that check width is being called. The button went away, and as we get smaller, the button shows up in the upper right-hand corner. If we make it larger again, the button disappears. So it's working fine, except we're not setting it properly at the very beginning. And that's because the resize event doesn't get called. So let's fix that. So I'm here in PS Framework Controller, and we want to inject the timeout service. The reason why we need timeout is that we want to be able to call check width, but we need to call this outside of the current digest cycle. So down at the bottom of this function, we'll use our timeout service, and we'll create a function to call, and we'll just have it call immediately after the digest cycle. And we want to call check width. We don't need to wrap this in a scope apply because the timeout service knows that the scope might change. So let's run this now. And we can see that our menu button is gone. As we shrink the window now, our menu button shows up, but there was a little glitch there. Let's see that again. It looks like in this case the menu button is showing up a little bit too early. I had to make a slight adjustment in order to fix that problem. The fix is already made, so let's take a look at it. If you look at our check width function, before we were just looking at $window inner width, but it ends up that's not good enough. Sometimes the scroll bar may show up. So in order to get the real width, what we need to do is call math.max to get the maximum of two values. The first value is the width function called on the window, and we wrap it in jQuery. And the second value is what we were looking at before, which is $window inner width. So with that in place, we're actually getting the full width of the viewport. So let's try this out. I'm running it in the developer tools, and I'll resize the viewport. And now we can see that our problem's gone. The menu button is showing, and it disappears instantly as the controls move up. So now we're fine. So the last thing we need to fix is to get this button to actually work, and we'll do that in the next video.